अजान शाह जी ने 1979 में प्रवजित किया। इसके तुरंत बाद वे इंग्लैंड लौट आए और अजान सुमोदी जी के साथ नवस्थापित चितस्ट मोनेस्ट्री में शामिल हो गए। वहां 1990 के दशक के दौरान अमरावती मोनेस्ट्री में कई वर्षों तक रहे और हर साल कैलिफोर्निया की यात्राएं करते रहे। जून 1996 में उन्होंने रेडवुड वैली कैलिफोर्निया में अभयगिरी मोनेस्ट्री की स्थापना की, जहां वे 2010 तक अजान प्रसन्न जी के साथ सह महंत थे। फिर वे बड़े मोनेस्ट्री के अबट बनने के लिए अमरावती लौट आए। अजान अमरो जी ने कई किताबें लिखी है, जिसमें चितस्ट से हरनहम बिहार तक 830 मील का ट्रेक का लेखा जोखा शामिल है, जिसे टुडोंग लॉन्ग रोड नॉर्थ कहा जाता है, जिसकी विस्तारित पुस्तक साइलेंट ट्रेन में पुनर्प्रकाशित किया गया। उनके अन्य प्रकाशनों में स्मॉल बोट, ग्रेट माउंटेन 2003, रेन ऑन द नाइल 2009 और द आइलैंड एन एंथोलॉजी ऑफ बुद्धास टीचिंग ऑन निब्बाना 2009 शामिल है, जो उन्होंने अजान प्रसन्न जी के साथ सहलिखित है। यह ध्यान के लिए एक मार्गदर्शक, जिसे शांति और खोज बौद्ध धम्म के संबंधित विबद्ध पहलुओं पर कार्य कहा जाता है। दिस इज ऑल टेकन फ्रॉम वेबसाइट ऑफ अमरावती बनते। सर, तुम्ही धम्ममंगलम बद्दल सांगा.
Bante, we are working from Dhamma Mangalam Trust. It is started from 2009 in Maharashtra. So we mostly practicing from Navayana and Bhao tradition, but also I practice also in some of Ajahn Chah's monastery. And from last 13 years, we taking meditation camps and giving teaching of the Dhamma in Maharashtra. And this is the small info.
Thank you.
कल्पना मैडम, क्षमायाचना, शीलयाचना.
शीतल पण आहे, त्यांनाही करायला. ओके, येस, करा.
वंदा मी म्हणते. मैम स्टार्ट करें. कल्पना मैम.
हाँ मैम. ओकास वंदामि भन्ते भारतेन मय्यागतं सबपराधं क्षमतु मे भन्ते. द्वितीयंपि ओकास वंदामि भन्ते भारतेन मय्यागतं
सबपराधं क्षमतु मे भन्ते. तृतीयंपि ओकास वंदामि भन्ते द्वारतैनं मयं कर्तं सबपराधं क्षमतु मे भन्ते. ओकासहं भन्ते तीसरनेनं सह उपोसतं शीलं धम्मं याचामि अनुगहं कृत्वा शीलं मे भन्ते. द्वितीयंपि ओकासः भन्ते शरणेनं सह उपोसतं शीलं धम्मं याचामि अनुग्रहं कृत्वा शीलं देथमे भन्ते तृतीयम्पि उकासरहं भन्ते तिसरनेन सह उपोसतं शीलं धम्मं याचामि अनुग्रहं कृत्वा शीलं देथमे भन्ते.
So I will recite the Namo Tassa 3 times, and then after I have finished the 3rd time, then I invite those of you who wish to determine the 3 refuges and the 8 precepts to join in reciting the Namo Tassa together after I've finished. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa.
Namo
Namo
tassa
bhagavato arahato samma
sambuddhassa. Namo
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma
sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammam saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sangham saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammam saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sangham saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammam saranam
Gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sangham saranang gacchami.
Ti sarana kamanang nititang.
Amante.
Anatipata Vairapmani Sikhapadang Samadhiyami.
Panatipata Veramani Sikhapadam Samadhiyami.
Adinadana Vairapmani Sikhapadang Samadhiyami.
Adinadana Veramani Sikhapadam Samadhiyami.
Abrahmacharya Vairapmani Sikhapadang Samadhiyami.
Abrahmacharya Veramani Sikhapadam Samadhiyami.
Musavada Vairapmani Sikhapadang Samadhiyami.
Musavada Veramani Sikhapadam Samadhiyami.
Sura Meraya Majappamadatana Vairapmani Sikhapadang Samadhiyami.
Suramiraya Vajjapamadana Veramani Sikhapadam Samadhiyami.
Vikala Bhojana Vairapmani Sikhapadang Samadhiyami.
विकारभोजना वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समादयामि
Nacha Gita Vadita Visokarasana Mala Ganda Vilepana Dharana Mandana Viphusanatana Verapmani Sikapadang Samadhiyami.
Visokarasana Mala Ganda Viphusanatana
Veramani Sikhapadang Samadhiyami.
Ucha Sayana Mahasayana Verapmani Sikapadang Samadhiyami.
Uchasayana Mahasayana Veramani Sikhapadang Samadhiyami.
Imani Ata Sikapadani Samadhiyami.
Ambhante
Sadhu.
Bante, can I do formal request for Dhamma Deshna?
You may. Please go ahead.
Brahmacha Lokadipati Sampati Katanjali Andhivaram Achayatha Santitta Satta Parakajati Ka Dese Tu Dhammam Anukamping Mangpajang.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Well, I am very happy and honored to be invited to offer some reflections on Dhamma for the Dhamma Mangalam group in Maharashtra and everybody else who is joining in with this event. Tomorrow, at least in the calendar that we have here in the UK, is the full moon day, Visakha Puja, and this is the most important day in the Buddhist calendar and a day for us to reflect upon our commitment to the Lord Buddha's teachings and the way of life that he embodied and the path of practice that he pointed out that leads to liberation. And so I'm happy to offer some reflections today. I'll try to speak in as clear, simple English as I can within the limits that are possible, so that as many people can understand. I'm not sure if you are planning to translate this later on, but I'll try to make it as easy as possible for people to say follow what I'm saying as I say it. Well, the theme for today is Muttodaya, the liberated heart, and the word Muttodaya was a name given to a collection of teachings that were, offered by the Venerable Venerable Ajahn Chah's teacher, and was probably the only book of his teachings that were put together in his, or at least shortly after his lifetime, and it's been translated into English as A Heart Released. So Venerable Ajahn didn't write any books himself, and but these teachings of Muttodaya were collected from a Dhamma talk that he gave and noted down by one of his disciples and then passed on. So I'm acknowledging and honoring that the fact of that's where the name came from, at least as far as I'm aware. But I won't use today just as a chance to speak about that particular collection of teachings, but rather to speak about the liberated heart as a quality, as an actuality, rather than just referring to Venerable Ajahn Mun's teachings. So I hope that is agreeable to everyone, and I will assume that that is the case. Another thing I'd like to say at the beginning is that even though the title of this Dhamma talk is The Liberated Heart, I don't want any of the community listening in and watching this to assume that I'm making any kind of claim of enlightenment. This is not a kind of declaration, but more it's a theme for exploration, for us to consider the whole nature of bondage, of limitation, the experience of confinement, and the possibility of liberation. So please don't assume or think that I'm trying to speak from a place of enlightened wisdom, declaring myself to be fully liberated, but rather I take the opportunity to speak about my understanding of how liberation happens and what it is that say obstructs that quality of liberation. So that's another piece of the background I like to put into place first of all. Well, in considering this and also the life and teachings of Venerable Ajahn Mun, my own teacher, Venerable Ajahn Chah, he only stayed with Ajahn Mun for a very short period of time, for about 3 days, when he was a young monk wandering in northeast Thailand. He managed to visit Ajahn Mun and was fortunate to listen to his teachings for a few days. And then after that time, he went off to practice Dhamma on his own. But during those few days, one of the most important teachings that Ajahn Mun gave to him, to the young Ajahn Chah, that had a very powerful impact upon him, because his mind was very prone to doubt and overthinking things and getting caught into confusion and uncertainty. So one of the principles that Ajahn Mun described to him that was a real turning point for the young Ajahn Chah was that Ajahn Mun said, there has to be some quality of awareness which is intrinsically and absolutely transcendent of what we call the 5 khandhas: rupa, the body, material form; vedana, sensation or feeling; sanya, perception; sankhara, mental formations, ideas, moods, imagination, memory, intention; and vijnana, discriminative consciousness, what we call the 5 khandhas. So there has to be some kind of awareness which is transcendent and liberated from the 5 khandhas, that is completely unlimited by the 5 khandhas. Otherwise, liberation would be impossible. If we have faith in the Buddha's enlightenment and the enlightenment of the great arahants, then liberation is possible. So there has to be some kind of element of knowing, some quality of awareness that is truly unbound, unlimited, unconfined by feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness, and by our material body and the material world. So this had a very powerful impact on the young Ajahn Chah, and that it was an insight that when he heard it, he realized that's true, that's absolutely true. And in the vernacular, the language of the forest tradition in northeast Thailand, they often refer to that quality as puru. Pu is a Thai say usage of the word purisa or purusha in Sanskrit, purisa in Pali, meaning the person or that quality, that individual quality. And then ru is the word for to know. So puru, often translated as the one who knows, but probably more accurately rendered as the element of knowing, or the vijja dhatu, the element of awareness or of knowing. So, but in Thai language, in the common speech of the forest tradition, puru is the ordinary term that is used for that. So that was a powerful moment for the young Ajahn Chah, and great faith and certainty in the truth of that teaching arose in him. And that was one of the blessings he received from his teacher, Ajahn Man, and they took with him. And that became a central feature of his own practice, his own, way of teaching then, as he became a teacher in due course. So that's what I'd like to particularly talk about today, that quality of transcendence. When we talk about the liberated heart, then that it's being liberated from the cycles of birth and death, liberated from the conditioned realm. And again, another related teaching that the Buddha gave in the Udana is Sutta number 3 in the book, chapter 8 of the Udana, where the Buddha said, there is the unborn, the unoriginated, the uncreated, the unformed. If there was not the unborn, the unoriginated, the uncreated, the unformed, then liberation from the born, the originated, the created, the formed would not be possible. But because there is atti bhikkhave, there is the unborn, the unoriginated, the uncreated, the unformed, therefore liberation from the born, the originated, the created, the formed is possible. Atti bhikkhave ajatang abhutang akantang asankatang. That is the Pali for that. So that is a powerful declaration by the Buddha, and also that informed that insight of Venerable Ajahn Man that he then passed on to the young Ajahn Chah. And so that in terms of the liberated heart, I feel it's important for us to consider, okay, there is that possibility. The Buddha is saying this is what we are inheriting from the teachings. And so then what's useful or what's important about in a talk like this is how can that quality of liberation be realized? How can we find that quality of liberation? We experience the sense of being bounded, being limited, our lifespan. Right now in India, they have the COVID-19 pandemic is raging. So many people are suffering from the illness. Thousands and thousands of people have died, and through Britain also, and around the world, in the USA, Brazil, and many other countries, illness is rampaging. And so we feel that limitation of the material world and the living system is very powerfully present in our lives. So we feel that there are many boundaries, many limits, many things that obstruct our freedom in our lives, not just in this current pandemic, but throughout the ages, from the Buddha's time right up to now. Our limits of our physical strength, our mental capacity, our how much money we've got, how much say ability we have to change the world or to achieve the goals that we set for ourselves. We're always meeting boundaries and limits. We keep coming across things that seem to obstruct us. So we long for freedom. There's a sense of being limited, even if you're not suffering from an illness, or you're not locked up in a prison. Even if you have great capacity as a human being, you have a lot of intelligence, a lot of say support in a wholesome family, you have a lot of financial resources, a lot of political freedom maybe, but still you can feel frustrated and limited, tied down, imprisoned. And sometimes it's even when you have those kind of so greatest resources in your life, when you are blessed with many opportunities, you can feel even more imprisoned, even more bound than when you are, say, more obviously limited by being so constrained by society, by your status in society, your lack of qualifications, or your lack of money, or your lack of say a good reputation or admiration of the people around you. It's a mysterious thing, but sometimes it's the most rich and powerful people who feel most stressed and burdened. And it's an interesting thing that in many of the most comfortable and wealthy countries of the world, like like in Scandinavia and countries like Norway or Denmark or New Zealand, very comfortable, secure countries, the levels of alcohol consumption, alcohol abuse, alcoholism, prescription drug abuse, non-prescription drug abuse, and suicide are very, very high. So even when you have everything, all the comforts in the world, you can still feel bound and limited and burdened by life. So this sense of the search for freedom and how to be free, this is something that was challenging people in the Buddha's time, and it challenges people still today. So how can, and the question is, how can I be free? How can I transcend the limits that the world seems to put upon me? How can I transcend, get beyond the limits that life puts upon me? How can I be free? And myself, as a young child and as a teenager, I spent a lot of time, focusing on this question. It was really a burning issue for me. How can I be free? There's so many things that are limiting me. I come from a poor family. If I had more money, then I could be free. If I didn't have to go to school, I could be free. If I didn't have to pass these exams, I could be free. If only everybody liked me, then I would be really free. But then you keep coming, no matter how many of those barriers you seem to cross, you keep running into more of them, different barriers, as each of those say individual goals get accomplished, or they are no longer limiting. Then there's another barrier and another limit, another boundary. We keep coming up against that sense of frustration and lack of freedom. So even in the Buddha's time, this was a similar case, and the real issue is that I would say that we're looking for freedom, we're looking for liberation in the wrong place. So, like for example, in the Buddha's time, there was a deva, Rohitasa, that came to visit the deva. You can find this in the story in the scriptures in the connected discourses, the Samyutta Nikaya, I think Devaputta Samyutta. It's the second book of the Samyutta Nikaya, Sutta number 26, the discourse to Rohitasa. So this deva, Rohitasa, came to visit the Buddha and said, Venerable Sir, in my previous life as a human being, I was a yogi. I was an accomplished yogi. I could walk through the sky. And I made this resolution that I would keep walking until I reached the end of the world. But even though I walked for years and years and years, and I died on the journey and I didn't stop to rest, except for just essential bodily functions. I just kept walking and walking, but still I couldn't get to the end of the world. And so the Buddha said to him, Rohitasa, I tell you, you can't get to the end of the world by walking, but if you don't get to the end of the world, you won't get to the end of suffering. So, and now I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few moments. So another encounter of the Buddha where he was talking to the layman Kevada, and the Buddha was giving an example, telling a story to Kevada on a similar principle. And he talked about a monk who had psychic powers. And in the mind of this monk, the question arose, where is it that the four great elements, earth, water, fire, and wind, where do they fade out? Where do they come to an end? Where do they cease without remainder? So a very similar question to the question of Rohitasa trying to get to the end of the world. Where is it that the four great elements come to an end? Where does the world end? And then in the story that the Buddha told, this monk had psychic powers, and he went up to that realm of the four great kings, and he asked the four great kings, where is it that the four elements fade out and cease without remainder? And they say, oh, we don't know, but try up in the Tavatimsa heaven. The devas up there, they might know. So he goes up to the Tavatimsa heaven, asks the Tavatimsa devas, and they say, oh, we don't know, you better ask the Yama devas, and then the Tusita devas, and then the Nimanarati devas, and the Paranimitavasavati devas, and then all the way up to the Brahma world, and each one says, oh, we don't know, but try upstairs. So finally he gets to the retinue of Mahabrahma, And then the retinue, the ministers of Mahabrahma say, oh, this is philosophy, this is very profound. We're just politicians, you know, we're just ministers for the great Brahma. But the great Brahma, he understands everything. So you should ask great Brahma. And if you're lucky, then the great Brahma will appear. And so then the monk waits, and then Mahabrahma appears, and the monk asks the question, where is it that the four great elements, earth, water, fire, and wind, fade out and cease without remainder? And Mahabrahma says, I am Brahma, the great Brahma, the omniscient, the almighty, the father and orderer of all that are and are to be. And the monk said, well, actually, thank you very much, your divine majesty, but I didn't ask you that question. I asked you, where is it that the four elements cease without remainder? And then Mahabrahma says the same thing, I am the almighty, the omniscient, and 3 times over, as often happens in these stories. And finally, Mahabrahma takes the monk by the elbow and says, listen, you're embarrassing me in front of my assembly. I don't know the answer to this question. And by the way, you know, you're a disciple of the master Gautama, the Sammasambuddha himself. So you should go and ask him. What are you asking me for? You know, you live with the Buddha. You should ask the master himself. So he went back down to the earth and then went to go and pay respects to the Buddha. And he said, so Venerable Sir, can you tell me, where is it that earth, water, fire, and wind fade out and cease without remainder? And the Buddha said, you're asking the question in the wrong way, because what you're doing in that question, you're trying to find an end to samsara, which is intrinsically endless. That's what samsara means. It is endlessness. You know, you're looking in the wrong place. You're thinking in terms of the solidity, the physical reality of earth, water, fire, and wind. You're thinking in terms of time. You're thinking in terms of place, and your mind is using the wrong framework for considering this question. So rather than asking where the four great elements cease without remainder, instead you should ask, where is it that earth, water, and fire and wind, and long and short, and coarse and fine, and pure and impure, where they can find no footing, where they can find no landing place, no ground? And then he said, where that is in essentially in the awakened mind, in the enlightened mind. And he uses a very interesting phrase, a Pali phrase, to describe that mind where the four great elements can find no landing place, no footing, no ground. He says, Vinyanang anidasanang anantang sabato pabang. Vinyan, which means the consciousness or the awareness, which is anidasanang, which means non-manifest, formless, anantang, limitless, boundless, sabato pabang, radiant in all directions or accessible from every side. He says, there it is, that the four great elements and long and short and coarse and fine and pure and impure can find no footing, they can find no ground. So that if you're interested in the sutta for that, that's the Digha Nikaya, the long discourses, sutta number 11, that's the Kevada Sutta, if you want to look that up. So the Buddha is then, he's reframes the question for the monk in that story to Kevada. And similarly, when he spoke to Rohitasa, the Deva, he said, yeah, you can't reach the end of the world by walking, but if you don't reach the end of the world, you won't reach the end of suffering. So then he said, which was a really interesting and helpful statement, it is in this fathom-long body, this 6-foot-long body with its perceptions and its thoughts, here is the world, the origin of the world, the cessation of the world, and the way leading to the cessation of the world. And in that instance, what does he mean by the world? He said, in a related teaching, he said, that whereby one is a perceiver of the world and a conceiver of the world, that is what we call the world in this Dhamma and discipline. And what is it whereby one is a perceiver and a conceiver of the world, the lokamani, lokasanyi? So the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind. So that is the world that the Buddha describes, and the world ends in that quality of awareness, that aspect of the heart, the citta, which knows seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, and feeling. That's where the world arises, and that's where the world ends, in this awareness. So he essentially gave the same answer to Rohitasa as he did in that to the monk in that story to Kevada. So this quality, I would say, of awareness, this vicca dhatu, the element of knowing, this is, I would say, this is the key to liberation. When we talk about the liberated heart, it's clarifying that quality of awakened awareness. This is where we can find genuine freedom, because the Buddha is saying you can't find freedom as long as the mind is locked into the conditioned world, because anything that begins ends. That when the mind is focused on seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, material objects, ideas, any conditioned aspect of our life, necessarily those are limited. And if there's a limit, if they're limited, then we experience frustration. They are say, bringing with them a feeling of imprisonment and confinement. So the problem is that we think, if I could, how can I be free? How can I free my heart? And that we don't realize that the one of the problems there is that attachment to I. That so that the mind is thinking, I want to be free, but not realizing that the I is part of the prison, or you can say the person is the prison. And in English, I know in Hindi or in Pali, the word for I is ahang, but in English, it's just the letter I. So you can think of it like a lot of prison bars. I. It's like a whole collection of prison bars. The person is the prison. So that in our practice in Buddha Dhamma and in the development of meditation, particularly insight meditation, vipassana, the essence of vipassana meditation is clarifying that quality of vicca, the vicca dhatu, the element of knowing. So when we talk about insight, it's in a way helping that quality of knowing, of awareness, to disentangle itself from seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, all of the different habits of clinging and attachment and identification that the mind has. Ajahn Chah used to say, the mind is really is like a bottle of with oil and water in it, and because we're always busy and attached and caught up with the activities of our life, it's like the bottle is shaken up, so it seems like there's me thinking, feeling, me, I am seeing, I am remembering, I'm hearing, I'm doing, I'm making choices. All those seem to be one thing. But when we practice meditation, it's like putting the bottle down. When you put the bottle of oil and water down, then the oil and water separate from each other. So like the water is like the objects of mind, sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch, thinking, remembering, imagining. And then the oil is like the awareness that knows that, like the teaching that Ajahn Man gave to Ajahn Chah. So when you put the bottle down, then the awareness and the objects of awareness, they separate out from each other. You don't have to make it happen. So that samadhi is like putting the bottle down, and then the objects of awareness and the awareness naturally separate from each other, so that when we leave things alone and the mind is awake and aware, there's a quality of knowing right now in this moment, knowing the computer screens that you're looking at, watching this Dhamma talk, or me looking at my computer screen here in Amaravati Monastery in southern England, that there's the awareness of this moment, but the objects of that awareness are intrinsically separate from that. The awareness is not limited or bound by the objects that it's aware of. The oil separates out from the water. And in Vipassana meditation, we say that there is that knowing of the arising and passing away of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, thought, feeling, emotion. There's the awareness of those, all aspects of the field of experience are anicca, dukkha, anatta. They are impermanent, uncertain, they are unsatisfactory, and anatta, they're not self. And so the recollection of those qualities of anicca, dukkha, anatta is helping the mind to disentangle, to let go of those areas of clinging where we so easily get caught up. And that when the awareness is free from those entanglements, those habits of clinging, then there's the awareness, which is limitless, which is anidasana, ananta, sabato, pabha, which is radiant and accessible from all sides, which is, say, boundless, which is formless. Then that awareness is not obstructed or confused or distorted by any of the objects that it is aware of. So that I would say, when we talk about the liberated heart, it's that that quality of awareness which is embodied, which is actualized when those habits of attachment and entanglement, identification are let go of. So in our practice and as useful advice, then it's in the work of vipassana meditation, what we're doing is, first of all, calming the mind to the point where we can pay attention to the present reality in a steady and consistent way, which we call samatha or calmness. And then when that steadiness has been established, then opening the field of awareness to know the flow of feeling, of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, thought, coming and going and changing. And so then there are moments of attachment. The mind gets attached to some kind of sense pleasure, the enjoyment of a particular color or a shape or a beautiful sound or a delightful taste. We call this kamupadana, the clinging to sense pleasure, kamupadana. Or there might be the attachment to an opinion, dittupadana, a view or an opinion that this is right, that's wrong, this is beautiful, that's ugly, this is true, that's not true. And that attachment to an opinion, to a view, dittupadana, attachment to views and opinions. Or it might be attachment to some kind of say, convention or set of rules or social agreements that we are, so this is the right way to dress, the wrong way to dress. This is how you should put your robes on. This is not how you should put your robes on. This is the right way to bow. This is the right way to chant. That's the wrong way to chant, the wrong way to bow. This is silapat upadana, the clinging or attachment to conventions or rites and rituals. Silapat is, and also not just the conventions of religious tradition, like bowing or chanting or how you wear your robes, but also Ajahn Chah would often say it's like the conventions of society, like making anjali or shaking hands. You know, what's the right thing to do? Do you make anjali or do you shake hands? Where are you? You know, which country are you in? Or he would talk about money. You know, that we agree to certain pieces of paper. So, okay, we say this piece of paper is worth 10 baht. This piece of paper is worth 100 baht. This piece of paper is worth 1,000 baht. It's just an agreement. There's no thing really there. It's just a piece of paper. So we can get lost in those agreements that we make, these conventions that we establish. Which side of the road is the right side of the road to drive on? I know I've spent a lot of time in India, so I know that it can be very flexible which side of the road people drive on, or on the sides of the road. It's very imaginative use of space and transport, but it's also, even in a very busy and active, somewhat unpredictable life on the road in a country like India, it's really just the same as here in the UK or anywhere. You have your own rules, your own conventions, what everyone is understanding everyone else to be doing. You read the signs, you know the codes, and so that we then say, oh, in this country, this is good and right. In that country, that's good and right. So like in India, my memory is that you use the horn a lot, because that's how you know that there's a vehicle behind you, because they use the horn. In other countries, when people go to India, they go, why is everyone using the horn so much? It's because in India, the convention is that's how you let someone know there's somebody behind them. to use the horn. In the UK, that you don't do that. You only use your horn very rarely when there's some kind of emergency. So the conventions vary from one country to another. So it's very easy to be attached to our conventions. And so like you're sitting in a meditation hall and then the person next to you starts moving, shuffling their posture. And you say, oh, we're not supposed to be shifting our posture. That person's doing the wrong thing. They shouldn't be doing that. And then we are judging the other person. We've lost track of our own mental activity and we've been born into a judgment about what somebody should be doing or they shouldn't be doing. They are going against the convention of sitting still. So Silapat Upadana is a very easy area for the mind to get caught up in attachment. And then the last area of clinging, of the four kinds of clinging that the Buddha spoke about, is Attavad Upadana. So the attachment to, the clinging to who we think we are, our name, our gender, our nationality, our occupation, our family, our personal story, our age, our state of health. You know, it's a long list of things that we can be attached to. That we create our story. When we introduce ourselves, we meet someone, we say our name, and that's who we think we are. I am Ajahn Amaro, that's me. But that's just a name, it's just a convention, it's just a form. So Attavad Upadana is attachment to the many ways of feeling that I am this person. So in terms of liberation, then, the development of insight is around seeing those attachments, seeing those areas of clinging to sense pleasure, to views and opinions, to conventions, and to the feeling of self, the feeling of being an owner, our life story, all of those areas, recognizing those as attachments, as ways the mind gets caught, and to change the view, to change the perspective on those. And and then going back to what I was saying earlier about that quality of awakened awareness, to see that all those habits of identification, if we look in terms of me being free, if the mind is attached to our age, our gender, our name, our story, our nationality, and so on, those can never be free. They're naturally limited, they're bound. Freedom can only come in the quality of awakened awareness. So that I would say that which knows the person isn't a person. That awakened awareness which knows the personal qualities isn't a person. That which knows masculinity isn't male. That which knows Englishness isn't English. Yeah, that which knows Buddhism isn't Buddhist. That awareness is free of those labels. It's a completely natural, a universal fundamental quality. It knows those attributes of the body, the personality, our personal story, the world around us. It knows those qualities. It knows the personal arising and passing away, but it is not bound or limited by that. So when we look for freedom, I want to be free, we're looking in the wrong place. And very interestingly, a few days ago, Ajahn Amaro made the statement, there's no such thing as an enlightened person. You know, that we tend to think, you know, I am a person and I'd like to be an enlightened person. But he made the point that there isn't any such thing as an enlightened person. From the outside, you might say, oh, you know, that person is enlightened and that one isn't. But from the inside, it's the awake mind is knowing those personal qualities arising and passing away, but there isn't any identification with being a person, if that makes sense. So that from the inside, there's just the awake mind knowing the body and its feelings and the objects of sight and sound and smell and taste and touch arising and passing away. But that which knows the person isn't a person. It's an awake, aware, formless, timeless quality. So another of the Buddha's teachings in the Udana, or in that same chapter 8 of the Udana, the Buddha said, there is that ayatana, that sphere of being, whereas there isn't earth, water, fire, or wind. There's no coming, no going, no standing still, no this world, no other world, no sun, no moon, no stars, no dying, no reappearance. So that can sound pretty like a lot of a lot of loss, a lot of absence. But he said that is actually the end of suffering. That ayatana, that quality of where there's no coming, no going, no standing still. And to our thinking mind, it's like, huh? How can that be? That sounds like a disaster. That sounds like the annihilation of everything. But the Buddha is saying, no, this is actually total freedom. And so the mind usually thinks in terms of time, in terms of individuality, me, I am this person. Today is May the 25th, day before the full moon. I'm in this place. I'm in Amaravati Monastery in England, and everyone who's joined in with this talk is scattered around India and other countries. So we think in terms of time, in terms of place, in terms of identity. And we don't realize that those are aspects of clinging. Those are aspects of attachment. And that if there is to be freedom, there has to be a recognition of those areas of attachment, of upadana, and a letting go of those attachments. So in that kind of teaching, the Buddha's saying that there is that ayatana, that dimension of our being, because it's not somewhere else. That ayatana is not anywhere outside our own mind. It's an aspect of our own being, our own mind. It's not off in space somewhere or in off in the Mahabrahma realm. It's an attribute of this mind, our minds, our hearts, our citta. So we to realize that, to embody that, then we have to recognize that which is apparently obstructing it. So Ajahn Chah used to take this same principle, and when people came to visit him at Wat Bapong, his main monastery, sometimes he'd ask them the question, if you can't go forwards and you can't go back and you can't stand still, where do you go? So that's an interesting question. Just sometimes people he'd never met before, or that he was just coming to the monastery for the first time, he'd say, just out of the blue, as we say in our English expression, out of the blue, he'd say, if you can't go forward, you can't go back, you can't stand still, where do you go? Then someone might say, can you climb a tree? Or can you go to the side? He said, no, you can't go sideways, can't climb a tree. Can you dig a hole? No, you can't climb down a well, can't climb a tree, can't go sideways, can't go backwards, can't go forwards, can't stand still. So there's no solution to the puzzle if you think in terms of I am a person who exists in this place, in this time, that as long as the mind is attached to identity, to time, and to location, there's no solution. The only way that puzzle can be solved is if the mind lets go of time, of identity, and of location. The Dhamma is timeless, it's akaliko. The Dhamma is not located, it's not anywhere. Where place doesn't apply. Just like the end, where the world ends doesn't apply, or where the four great elements cease. Those questions don't apply. Awareness doesn't apply, and identity, self doesn't apply. So when the mind lets go of time, of place, of identity, then that quality of freedom is realized, or realizable, if that's not too difficult a word. So that what we are doing in this way is we're training the mind to find freedom where it can genuinely be found, which is in this quality of awakened awareness. And if we continue to look for freedom in terms of our physical health, or having a big, high-ranking social position, or having a lot of money, or having a lot of, say, qualifications, or even a lot of political freedom. I know these are not simple issues, these are complex and multifaceted issues. But even when we have a lot of privilege, I come from a white middle-class male educated background, a kind of, in terms of social order of the world, and I inherited a lot of very privileged status just through the actuality of where I got born and my family's situation. But even with all of that, there was the experience of being far from free, which is why I've been a Buddhist monk for the last 40 years. You know, all of those privileges, the education and the skin color and my language, my accent, and so forth, doesn't help. But even though there are those other aspects of things that limit us, that bind us, the genuine quality of freedom, and the Buddha himself came from a highly privileged background. He was a prince, a crown prince in the kingdom of the Sakyas, and yet he experienced that sense of bondage, of limitation, and he needed to break out of it. So when we realize that the only place that freedom can genuinely be found, even though we do work to look after our physical health, we work to provide for our families, we look to educate ourselves and set things in as good an order as we possibly can on the material front, the actual quality of freedom can only be found as an inner quality of attitude. It can only be, say, that which is unbound by samsara. It's in that the citta, the heart itself. That's the only place that genuine freedom can be found. And so then, even with difficult limitations like physical illness, old age, then the limitations that come from not being able to see very well or hear very well, having a physical weakness, those are not an obstruction. Just as the Buddha gave advice to his elderly disciple Nakulapita, who was over 100 years old, and he came to the Buddha and he said, I'm old, I'm decrepit, I'm really sickly, what's your advice for someone in my position? And the Buddha said, better to be afflicted in body and not afflicted in mind than to be afflicted in mind and not afflicted in the body. And so then he gave this advice to Nakulapita of the teachings on anicca, dukkha, anatta, and letting go of identification with the body, with the personality, with perception, and so on. So when the Buddha speaks about this quality of awakened awareness, I also feel other teachings that he gave are really very, very useful in this regard. So when he was, another dialogue that he had was with Vacchagotta, who was a wanderer from a different sect. And Vacchagotta used to come and ask the Buddha questions very regularly. And he was asking the Buddha, where does an enlightened being go when they pass away? And where do they reappear? And the Buddha said, reappears does not apply, Vaccha. He said, well, do they not reappear? Do they just vanish? Are they annihilated? And the Buddha said, does not reappear. That doesn't apply either, Vaccha. And then Vacchagotta said, well, do they both reappear and not reappear? And the Buddha said, no, that doesn't apply either. And lastly, the fourth one, he said, well, do they neither reappear nor not reappear? And the Buddha said, that doesn't apply either. And then Vaccha said, oh, yeah, I'm really confused because one of these must be true. It can't be anything other than that. And the Buddha said, well, Vaccha, you're asking the question in the wrong way. Again, like in the Kevada Sutta and with Rohitassa, you're asking the question in the wrong way. He said, say we had a little fire here, made of grass and sticks, and the fire went out. And I asked you the question, where did the fire go? North, south, east, or west? What would you say? And Vacchagotta said, well, I'd say the question doesn't apply. It didn't go north, south, east, or west. It just went out. And the Buddha said, exactly, Vaccha. You ask the question in a way that presumes a reality that does not exist. So north, south, east, or west doesn't apply. Reappears doesn't apply, does not reappear, does not apply, and so on. Then he went on to say, he kind of described his own subjective experience, and I feel this is a very good way of relating to this quality of the vijja dhatu, the element of awareness, which when the Buddha used the word tathagata, as the word he used to refer to himself. And he said, that material form, that rupa, vaccha, whereby someone trying to describe the Tathagata would describe him, that has been cut off at the root, made like a palm tree stump, deprived of the conditions for existence and rendered incapable of arising in the future. The Tathagata cannot be reckoned, cannot be measured in terms of rupa, vaccha. He is profound, immeasurable, unfathomable, like the great ocean. So too with Vedana, with Sanya, with Sankara, and with Vijnana. Each one he says the same thing. You know, that consciousness, Vijnana, whereby one trying to describe the Tathagata with describing that's been cut off at the root and so on. The Tathagata cannot be reckoned, cannot be measured in terms of consciousness. He is profound, immeasurable, unfathomable, like the great ocean. So in that you have the word Tathagata, I feel is very translatable as that very quality of knowing, that awakened awareness, that awake, aware, liberated quality. It is ati bhikkhave, you know, it is, it's there, it's present, but you can't define it in terms of the five khandhas. It's profound, immeasurable, unfathomable. So like standing by the seashore and looking out over the ocean is vast. You know, the water reaches to the horizon. What's under the surface you can't see. It's powerful. There's a sense of wonder standing on the seashore. And the Buddha uses that image of standing on the shore, looking at the ocean. Profound, immeasurable, unfathomable, that great presence, but you can't define that in terms of our ordinary values of time, of identity, or of location. So that in the process of vipassana meditation, what we're doing is freeing the heart from its attachments, its entanglements, so that that profound, immeasurable, unfathomable quality of awakened awareness can truly be embodied, can be actualized. And so when we talk about the liberated heart, we're liberating it from the person. So the person can't be liberated, but the heart can be liberated from its attachment to personhood. The person is the prison. So it's not me realizing the Dhamma, but rather the Dhamma realizing the me. That which knows the person isn't a person. Yeah, so the mind in this respect, the citta is Dhamma, it's not a person. And when the framework for practice of Dhamma is rejigged, reshaped in that way, then that so it goes a long way to helping the work that we do in our meditation, in our Buddhist practice, to enabling that quality of genuine liberation to be realized and to be something that is genuine within our life, despite illness, despite aging and sickness and the many difficulties that the world provides. We can still find freedom within that. And then from that place of freedom, we can work in the world, we can help each other, we can do what can be done to help the living conditions for each other to be better, to be more supportive, to be more humane and fair and equal for everyone. But we're not looking for that kind of finality or genuine freedom on the worldly front, because there's a recognition that it, along with what we can provide on the worldly front, the genuine and real freedom is only realizable as an inner quality. And this is, I feel, one of the great and wonderful messages that the Buddha gave to us, and is something to recollect on this Visakha Puja occasion. A1.
Sadhu, sadhu. रवींद्रजी प्रश्नासाठी हे करायचं का? But is it okay to ask the question or time?
We have a little time. It's just past 4 o'clock in the afternoon here in England, so I think it's just past 8:30 in the evening there in India. Is that correct?
Yes, Bhante, it's correct.
So yes, I'm happy to answer a few questions up until 4:30 my time.
Okay. कुणाला प्रश्न आहेत का? Okay. Yeah, unmute करा.
Vandami Bhante. Bhante, I want to ask how to concentrate on work and how to solve the disturbed mind from other activity.
How to concentrate on what?
Yes, work. We should do doing some simple work, online work, or doing any business. How to concentrate that work?
Well, one of the things that is always helpful is to develop mindfulness of the body, because the body is always in the present moment. And so that when we are working, often we get caught up in the mental side of things, or in speaking and in communicating. And so we can be bringing a lot of habits of stress and tension into the picture. So if we develop a mindfulness of the body, so when you're walking to your workplace, or you're sitting down in a chair at your workplace, you're sitting in front of a computer screen, or then your body is present. So when you walk, you can notice the feeling of walking, the sensations of your body moving along, the different things that you're seeing and you're hearing as you walk, the sensations of the weight of your body on your feet, and then when you sit in a chair, the weight of your body in the chair. So if we use the mindfulness of the body and the sensations of the body as a reference point, then if we are stressed or we're tense, then we notice that much more easily. And so if we are bringing attention to the body and then relaxing the body, bringing a quality of say, of ease and being settled in the body, then that is always a helpful thing when you're in a meeting in the workplace, or you're talking to someone on the phone, or you're engaged in some kind of activity, talking to your co-workers or your employees or whatever, then your body is always present. So just turning the attention to the body, noticing how you're standing, what your hands feel like, what's the expression in your face, just bringing attention to that, and then letting the power of that attention bring about a quality of integration. That's always a helpful thing.
Thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Mr. Vaibhav.
Please, another question.
Yes.
Bhante, hello.
Hello,
Yes,
Vicha.
Yes. Bhante, as you told in the Dhamma talk, Ajahn Chah, then other people also, that monk and Deva, they all have something, some doubt in their mind. And in our practice also, we get doubt. Actually, the wrong questions that we follow. So how to know that that our question is wrong, and how to arrive at how to ask right questions?
That's a good question. Well, the kind of questions that are unhelpful are almost always tied up with feelings of agitation, and also with feelings of self. There's a lot of self-view of what should I do? What do they think about me? I've got this problem. What am I going to do about him? I've got to go there, and so how am I going to do that? So the kind of obstructive, doubting thinking is almost always got a quality of self-view, of Sakkaya Ditthi, and also of agitation. And so that's, if there is that kind of tone or feeling to the question, then you know this is probably just mental chatter and is not to be taken seriously. These are not important questions. It's just like, as Ajahn Chah would say, this is just like the chattering of the birds. Like it's just mental agitation going on and not of any great value. The kind of skillful sorts of question are questions that when we talk about wise reflection, and it should be understood, it can be difficult to tell the difference between these two. It's not always obvious, but the kind of questioning, wise reflection, then that usually has a quality of being more coherent, like a sentence has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Like there might be the reflection, like there's a feeling of anxiety here. I wonder where has this come from? What's the cause of this anxiety? So there's more of a measured quality. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's also like a space before the thought and a space after the thought. So when it's genuine wise reflection, what we call yoniso manasikara or Dhamma Vijaya, there's that spacious quality. It's much more coherent, and there's usually much less of any kind of self-view woven into it. So the question, like, what is the mind? The mind is attached to something. What is the mind getting attached to here? Or that there's this is a feeling of being excited. Why is this exciting? What makes this thing attractive? And so there's a whole different tone to the process of wise reflection. And with meditation and watching the mind, then it's something that you can get familiar with. It's rather like learning a language. At first, if you don't speak anything other than your own language, when somebody's speaking Portuguese or Dutch or Spanish, you might not be able to tell the difference at all, but then you spend some time in those countries and this is Dutch, this is Spanish, they're really different. But at first you can't, it's all just sort of a blur of things you don't really understand. But the more you pay attention, the more you get familiar, then you recognize, okay, this is different from that. So the more we watch our minds and then use the ability to think deliberately, then we begin to learn how to use the thinking mind for wise reflection. And so, and also it helps us to learn how to be mindful of thought without believing in the contents of thought, because a lot of our suffering and difficulty comes from assuming that our thoughts are true and meaningful, and most of the time they are, I say 95% of our thoughts are not true and not meaningful. They're just sort of the kind of echoes or reverberations of the day.
Thank you, Bhante. Sadhu.
सर मी एक प्रश्न विचारतो.
Okay.
Ajahn, as
Yes.
you just talked in this Dhamma talk, awareness apart from the 5 aggregates.
Yes.
So that is to be realized, or we can practice that?
Well, both. I mean, the practice comes first and the realization comes after. So you have the pariyati is the idea of it is the first part, and then practice. So to developing the feeling for it, or recognizing what that quality is, and then the realization, the pativeti is that, okay, this is what this is the nature of this quality. It's like this. So that and then remembering to apply that. In a way, taking refuge in the Buddha isn't just putting our hands together and making vandana to Gautama Buddha, but taking refuge in the Buddha is really the practice of being that awakened, aware quality. And the more that is established as an ongoing quality, then the more the heart is abiding in that refuge, is say being that very knowing. That sort of the heart abides in the refuge of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Really, does that make sense?
Yeah, Bhante. Sadhu.
Next question. Pranjali, please unmute.
Vandami Bhanteji.
Yes, please ask your question.
So main cause of anxiety comes from most of the time comes from negative perception. So how to develop our negative perception from negative? How to develop our mind from negative perception to positive perception?
Well, the first thing is to recognize that they are perceptions. Mostly we assume that what we're experiencing is reality. And that teaching that I was, one of the teachings I was quoting, where the Buddha said that whereby one is a perceiver of the world and a conceiver of the world, that is what we call the world in this Dhamma and discipline. So that's recognizing that we don't see the world. What we see is our mind's version of the world, right? So all of us, right? I mean, it's very easy now. We're all looking at computer screens or phones or iPads or whatever. So, you know, we are not experiencing the world. We're experiencing the version of the world through this screen, through this agency. So just to be, first of all, to recognize, oh, this is my mind's version of the world. This is, and so this particular pattern of perception is a pattern of perception. It's not reality. It's just one presentation, one representation. So that's a big step in and of itself, if you can get a feeling for that. And then when we have a negative perception, like feeling self-critical or getting angry with other people, judging other people, then rather than say, think, oh, that's a negative perception, that's really destructive, that's hurtful, I should get rid of this. You know, if right there, the mind has created self-view. I have this perception, I'm the owner of this. So self-view has been reinforced there, and that perception is a real thing, that shouldn't be there. And if I get rid of that, if I've got that, if I get rid of it, then there'll be me without that. So the mind is actually investing in self-view and also vibhavatanha, the desire to get rid of. So even though there might be a wholesome motivation, the result of working in that way is you create more suffering. Yeah, that acting on vibhavatanha, the desire to get rid of those perceptions, it reinforces them. So the most helpful thing is to be aware of, okay, this is a negative perception, this is a critical feeling, or this is an angry emotion. It feels like this. And then simply letting the awareness be attuned to that judgment, that angry feeling, and anger feels like this, or being critical feels like this, self-hatred feels like this. And the less commentary, the better. The less sort of, I shouldn't feel this way, how can I get rid of this? Wouldn't life be great if this was over? Leave all of that aside as much as possible, and just let the mind be fully aware of those negative states. And then the painfulness of them is more and more obvious. So when the mind is angry, just knowing that angry feeling, you don't even have to think, ow, this is uncomfortable. You know it's uncomfortable. Like when you burn your hand in a fire, you don't have to think, ow, it's already hurt, you know, that the pain is already there. So that, and it's interesting to me that the more wordless the process is, the more effective that awareness is in terms of helping our behaviors to change. When you realize that the painfulness of attachment directly and without creating more self-view around it, just that's been attached to, here is a result, ow, then there's the lesson. The mind learns in a very profound and direct way. So that's, and then, so you're not just trying to replace negative thoughts with positive thoughts, but it's really developing the quality of awareness as the balancing and the healing agent. That's how I would describe it.
Thank you so much.
Unmute kara please quickly. Mr. Ayush.
I see a few hands, but I don't hear any voices.
Tejas. Yes. Yes. Tejas.
Vandami Bhante. This is Tejas here. The question that I would like to ask you is, being a monk, what does fraternity, what does brotherhood mean? And what are the learning lessons for me when it comes to brotherhood from a monk or from the the monastic community? That would be my question.
The sound wasn't very clear there, but I think you asked about fraternity for a monk. Well, so fraternity or the
yeah, so I'll repeat the question, Bhante, again.
Thank you.
Being a monk, what does it mean? What does brotherhood? What does fraternity mean? And what are the lessons for layman from, let's say, a monk or a monastic community for in context of brotherhood or fraternity? Yes, Bhante.
Yeah, good question. I'd say the brotherhood and fraternity is a real essence of Sangha life. I mean, the Sangha means the unified assembly. So the Buddha taught a group. It was not just he established the Sangha as the third refuge, and so that sense of working together and being a fraternity is absolutely central to the practice. It helps us to recognize this is a relational practice, a relational process. We work together, we live together, we affect each other, we support each other. So it works in two ways. One, insofar as your effort is to support the people around you, but also the people around you support you as well. So it works in both directions. And so being part of a community, you both support and are supported by a community. So those qualities and how we sustain harmony in a group, the Buddha pointed out these what are called the Saraniya Dhammas, or these beautiful qualities that help to sustain harmony in the group. And so these are maintaining and being loving kindness in thought, word, and action. Those are the first three. Then maintaining a shared quality of sila, of like respecting the qualities of virtue and living according to a shared standard of conduct. Everyone's on the same page, as it were, in terms of behavior, and trying to live honorably and harmlessly, honestly, respectfully. So that that's the fourth one. Then sharing the things that you have, even he said, even to the contents of your alms bowl. So that if you've got a bit more food than the monk next to you, you make sure you share what you have with him, so that everyone has an equal share. And then the sixth one of these Saraniya Dhammas, these the supports for concord, he is to, as he puts it, to develop and sustain the insight that is noble and liberating. Essentially, that means the insight into anicca, into uncertainty and impermanence. So it's the last on the list, but it's maybe the most important is that on the inner level, you're developing the quality of wisdom as an active moment-by-moment process. And that, in a mysterious way, is what helps us to work together more completely, is that the development of wisdom and learning to let go of self-view and let go of each other, so that you're in this way, he's saying, developing loving kindness, developing so metta, the quality of sila, of virtue, the quality of generosity, dana, and also mindfulness for the needs of others, and then panya, wisdom, as in the developing the noble and liberating insight. So that those are the ways that we work to help sustain a quality of harmony in our communities, but in the nuns, in the monks, and in our ways of relating and operating. And then that I would say that translates very easily into family life, into the workplace. You can't control what everybody else does, but in the workplace or in the family. But you can talk about those qualities, those saraniya dhammas, those beautiful qualities of behavior, and to recognize that, okay, that's what helps bring us together. That's what helps to bring out the best in us. And also, in terms of community, to be, like I was saying at the very beginning, to bear in mind that it goes both ways, that community life is both you helping others and others helping you. And sometimes for some people, it's easier to help others, and we don't like to be helped ourselves. We have this false sense of independence. I don't need anybody. I don't need anything. I'm fine. But yet, to allow ourselves to be helped and to be supported, there's a humility in that, and it's also beautiful to let other people have the opportunity to help us if they have that inclination.
Very insightful, Bhante. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Bhante, is it okay to take a question, because only 4 minutes left now?
Yeah, one more.
Okay. Can I ask, Bhante? But many hand is already raised.
Go ahead. Yes, whoever.
Okay. Bhante, in Dhamma talk, you say that Ajahn Sumedho comment that there is no one going to enlighten, right?
He said that there's no such thing as an enlightened
Enlightenment,
person.
yes.
And that there's no
Enlightened
such
person.
thing as an enlightened person.
So Bhante,
yeah.
Personality is a creation of our ego, our I. Is it right, Bhante?
Well, the personal qualities get sort of put together because of our birth and our conditioning, and then the I feeling takes those and forms them into the kind of the atta, the self view. I am the body, I'm the personality. So it's a complex of different influences, but it's that attachment to I and me and mine that then so forms that together and says, I am this individual person. This is me, this is what I am.
Yeah. So how to free this I from bondage of this unmindfulness, Bhante?
Well, we can use different methods to look at that feeling of I and me and mine. And so insight meditation, vipassana, and the development of insight into not self, anatta, is very much about that. That sense of of looking at those feelings of I-ness, like when we are sitting meditating, and then you think, I hear the sound of the traffic in the street. No, there's hearing. The I is extra. There's hearing. Okay. The creation of a me who's the hearer is extra. Oh, so in that the I has been let go of, and what's there? There's awareness. There's the hearing. And then in that moment, there's no sense of self. And maybe that's just half a second or a quarter of a second. But in that moment, when there is a genuine, not just the thinking the words, it's not me hearing, but that there's a difference between the idea of insight and the actuality of insight as a change of vision. So a change of understanding. So in that moment where it's like, oh, there isn't a me who's hearing, there's just hearing. Oh, and that in that moment, there's a letting go of the atta feeling, that the mind has let go of that conceit of I am, the asmi mana. There's knowing, there's still the sense objects, the feelings of the body or the hearing the sound in the street. But in that moment, it's really clear oh, there's no thing here, there's no person here. There's the awake mind knowing the feeling, knowing the experience of hearing. Oh. And then we can also use active forms of reflection and inquiry to look at that I, me, and my feeling. One of the most interesting kinds of reflections to do, or investigations to do in meditation, when the mind is quite quiet and still, just to think the word I. No commentary, not I anything, just I. And notice how weird the word I, or ahang, just the word, wow, what does that mean? Huh, what is that? Or our own name, like, is it Ravindra asking this question?
No, Deepak Bhante.
Deepak asked the question. So just let your mind be completely quiet, go completely quiet, as still as possible, and then think the word Deepak. What is that? Notice that I mean, I'm not reading your mind, but for most people, when we just say our own name without any kind of context, just Deepak, there's something in the jitta that goes, what on earth is that? Huh? There's a weirdness because we're so used to that the self-view that comes up around the name. I am this person. I'm helping to run this Buddhist group in Maharashtra. That's who I am. You know, I'm on this Zoom event. But when you sort of take all that away and just put your name there and hanging in the space of the mind, then Amaro. Even as I say that, there's that kind of, huh, what? There's that, and that weirdness, that's a reliable, I would say a reliable insight that in that moment, the clarity of wisdom is recognizing, well, that's just a construction, it's just a sound. Deepak, Amaro. It's just a noise, it's just a construction of sounds. What's the referent? What's the thing it's referring to? Oh, there isn't anything. Oh. So that's a very useful kinds of ways of exploring the habits of self-creation. And by seeing, just as I was describing to the earlier person about wanting to replace the negative perceptions with the positive perceptions, just knowing the weirdness of I, of me, of our name, Deepak or Ravindra or whatever, Amaro, then just letting that awareness of the strangeness of that or the emptiness of that have its effect. Of course, that's just a construction, it's just an agreement to call this particular zone of experience Amaro or Deepak or Ravindra. It's just an agreement. You know, you're only Deepak because that's what your parents called you, or maybe you chose the name. But, that's what that zone of experience has got referred to. But what is that? What's it referring to? And there's no thing there that the mind defines. It's profound, immeasurable, unfathomable, like the great ocean. The kind of the further in you go, the bigger it gets, and the less personal. So these kinds of meditation can help the breaking of the illusion of self-view and strengthen that quality of insight and relying upon that quality of knowing, so that the awakened awareness becomes the ground of experience rather than the idea of I, me, and mine. So I hope that's helpful.
Yes, Bhante, thank you.
It's also significant that when the Buddha was asked whether he was a person, when in that dialogue with the Brahmin Dona, when Dona asked him, "Are you a human being?" the Buddha said, "No." You know, he's born of human parents and he's an arahant. He's incapable of lying. But when the Brahmin Dona said, "Sir, are you a human being?" the Buddha said, "No, Brahmin. Nako ahang brahmana manuso bhavisamiti. Nako ahang brahmana manuso bhavisamiti." That whereby I would be known as a human being is not present. That is not there. So the Buddha isn't capable of lying, but when he said, "Are you a human being?" he said, "No." And then when he's asked, "Well, what are you?" then he said, "Buddhosmi," that you can know me as one who is awakened. That's the and that's one of the reasons why we call the Buddha the Buddha. Buddhoti mang brahmana tareti. Remember me as one who is awakened. So
Yes.
that is a really significant dialogue when letting go of personhood, that which knows the person isn't the person. And even the Buddha, the Buddha is declaring that right there. that Buddha quality is knowing the personal, but it's not a person. So I think that's enough for today.
Yes. Fine.
Thank you for your bringing this event together, and I wish you all well for this Visakha Puja observance.
Thank you very much, Bante, for coming. And Ravindra sir, kai bolai sir?
Very well explained, Bante, Ajahn ji. And many of the meditators may clear their concepts, and this may be useful in their practice. So I am doing Anumodan. Andamayang Dhamma Kathaya Sadhukara Dadamase. Sadhu, 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 Anumodami. Blessings.
So blessings to you all.
Thank you, Bante.
Thank you.